part of it.
Right. So welcome everyone to our Triumph Life weekly book study group. And I'm going to turn it over to our facilitator, who's joining us virtually this evening, and that's Jessica, also AKA Sunday Rose. Sunday Rose.
Wow. Yes, that's me. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. And special thanks to everybody who watched the replay and saw it and was like, I like this. I'm gonna do it. So thank you for joining. I would like to start first by telling you a little bit about me, and then I was shuffling some cards. I used some cards last week. I know some of us were really interested in the cards that I used, and so I will be providing you that information too. After I tell you just a little bit about me. So yes, my name is Sunday Rose Goals. My pronouns are she, her, they, them. I consider myself a gender nonconforming Black woman. And for that, that means that I identify with the experience, the lived experience of Black womanhood, because I was raised by a Black woman and raised as a Black woman, but that I divest away from what society says Black women should do or how Black women should labor in service to it. So that's how like my gender identity is kind of formulated. And shout out to Sandra, who gave me the opportunity to talk about that. Like, so that's also on YouTube. So if you haven't watched it, please do. And again, thank you for the space. So I'm gonna now tell you about the card that honestly flipped out twice as originally I took it and I put it back and then I'm like, okay, well, it came out again. So let's see what it is. Last week I used some Mudra cards, and the name of the deck I believe it's called the Mudra deck. I'm going to provide people with like an Amazon link if you use Amazon, if that's a thing for you. If not, I'll just provide you with, the illustrator, the author, and the title or name of the cards. But today, I'm pulling from a deck. It's called African Goddess Rising. So if you wanted to get a good look at this, I will also send this in a link so that, oh yeah, because of my camera, hold on. Here we go. We're doing it. So this first deck, this deck that I'm going to use today is the African Goddess Rising Oracle deck. I will send folks the link to these things. I know some people requested a syllabus or just like a text version of what we're going to do here, and I will also provide that for you. So, but the card that came out is Aunt Nancy and came out in reverse. And I'll just show y'all. What I really do like about this virtual thing is the camera thing, how I get to show y'all this. But this is the card, and I'm just gonna read what that, feels like and what that is in the little book that we have here. And then we're gonna move into taking a deep breath together and then moving into our second half of I guess it's the introduction, which is the dream of the planet. So we're gonna finish that, and then we're going to talk about the first agreement, which is be impeccable with your word. And shout out to Sandra, I have the book, so I will be providing some page references as well. And if you hear me talking about something and you're like, oh, that was on this page, please feel free to put it in the chat and let me know so that I can mark it down. Because I'm listening to two different versions at the same time. So I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. So this card is 20. And so I'm just going to find that here in my book. So Aunt Nancy is the shadow of betrayal of the diaspora or Akan people. And She's also known as Anansi, and we probably all have heard about Anansi the spider, the Anansi story, so on and so forth. All of the like goddesses and representations in this deck are calling to historical moments, and myths and stories, and I guess spirituality, and the spirituality building of like specifically Black people of the diaspora or Africans, right? So Anansi, or Kwaku Anansi, the icon trickster god and sacred clown, snuck into our global folk tales, while Gullah Geechee children heard tales of Aunt Nancy, the tricky Spider Woman. My Guyanese parents entertained us with Nancy stories about a witty teen spider. Here is Aunt Nancy's shadow guidance. Who really betrayed you? Betrayals from others mirror you betraying yourself. Embodiment. Betrayal is a web that disrupts everything you thought you knew. Use discernment in your relationships. This is actually very much so relevant to what we're going to talk about today. Betrayal makes it difficult to trust. But without trust, your relationships are a lie. Trust that no matter what happens and no matter how long it takes, you will survive and thrive. The real question, how have you betrayed or abandoned yourself? That's really funny because I actually do have a question about this in our discussion for today. Goddess declaration, I am willing to know the truth. This is so on brand. Just keep that. So this is going to be our mantra. So we're going to go into our deep breath together. And that mantra of, I am willing to know the truth. As you inhale and exhale, I want you to just repeat that to yourself in your mind, or whatever version of that feels best. And think about what lie maybe it is that you need to release or let go of in order to see whatever the truth is that you're looking for. So I'm going to put this down. If you're sitting down or anything like that, you can just take your hands, put them on your lap, or have your palms up to the floor or down if you want to release some energy, whatever feels comfortable. I'm going to close my eyes here. You do not have to close your eyes. You know, do what you want to do what feels comfortable. Okay. But I'm going to close my eyes. I'm going to have my palms facing up to the sky. And I'm just going to take a deep breath, and I invite y'all, okay? Let's take a deep breath in through the nose on the count of 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold, release. 3, 2, 1. I am willing to know the truth. Let's do it again. Inhale through the nose. And exhale, I am willing to know the truth. Last time. Inhale. And exhale, I am willing to know the truth. So, shout out to all y'all for, joining in the capacity that you could in that small meditation. So, we are going to get into the last thing that I believe we talked about. Sorry, I have several books in my hands. Have my notes in a couple of places, but we were talking about the domestication of the planet. Last week, we talked about what does domestication mean, right? What is a dream? What does that look like? Or what does that feel like? Or really just defining the terms for ourselves so that we're able to ground ourselves in the text and see our own experiences as opposed to just seeing the text for what it is, being able to relate to it more so. And I always think that's super helpful, especially when you're reading a book like this that's helping you to make better agreements and better relationships. And so the word that I keep hearing is discernment, because I remember last week we talked about how our ability to agree or make other agreements really helps us to shape our lives. And how it kind of also reminds you of like when you're cutting something, or if you're like, if there's like a bush and you're like trimming a bush, and how you want to make sure it's like all even on each side. So there's that. But we did want to think about, this is our icebreaker question. How, I want to know, and take everyone, take, a couple minutes to think about it, but I'm interested in how you believe or feel in your experience your discernment has helped you make really good decisions, or what's a decision that you made, or an agreement that you made. And when we say agreement, we're talking about if you believe that whatever you believe, whatever your belief is, whatever your faith is, if you believe that you're beautiful, if you believe that you are not, if you believe that you are smart, whatever the belief is, right? I want you all to think about, what's a belief that I have, right? Or something that has happened to me in my life, or decision that I've made where I've used really good discernment and it's really served me. And also think about something that maybe not so much. And I would love to hear from y'all what either of those things are. You can decide to share the one that you learned from, where you're like, ooh, that was a lesson. I didn't use my discernment too good there, but or I did use it really well and I want to share this example. So y'all have options. And so I'm going to put myself on mute, and I'm going to allow whomever wants to go first, because I cannot really see the participants, but whoever wants to share, please do. I'm really interested. I'm also going to type it out in the chat.
Okay, so do you want us to maybe, I don't know if someone on the virtual space wants to go first, or if someone here? I mean, I was just thinking, and maybe just kind of give everybody a minute to think about it. Maybe I'll go first and just share.
Oh, yes. Everyone take a minute, think about it. And if I feel like whomever, Sandra, if you can go first, that would be great. And then whoever in Zoom wants to go, you can communicate that through the chat, and I'll be sure to make sure I pass the ball to you.
So I was thinking discernment has always been a big word for me as a child going into teen years and an adult life. Discernment, I think I have an agreement, or made an agreement early on with life, to value discernment and to listen, at least on some level, to that inner voice that speaks to me with wisdom about situations. So there are certain situations, there are certain times when discernment has served me, I think, very well, but that discernment has often been with falling back on lessons that I was taught, and using those as guideposts. So a lesson that I was taught, say, as a young person, and then using that as a tool of discerning whether something was potentially a wise choice or not. This is a story I've shared many times, and it's when I was a very young woman. One of the lessons I learned growing up from my parents, something very simple. My parents, being old school, would give these kind of one line or these short lessons, and kind of off the cuff, they would say things to us, and some things would stick and some wouldn't. But one of these things was that if you're going out, and we had a big family, so if you're going out together, always leave with, wherever you're going, whoever you're going with, leave with who you came with. Don't separate. Don't go off in different directions. And that, for whatever reason, was something I made an agreement with in myself. And when I was in my mid-20s, there was an occasion where I was out with some family, some friends. It was a group of us that went out. We were doing the party and thing, having a good time on a Friday night at a club. And there was a situation where a young man, was trying to talk to me, and he seemed, very mannerly and etc. at that point. And then he offered, why couldn't we leave and go somewhere else? So I said, no. In fact, my group, those who I came with, we were planning to go somewhere else. But we all came in the same car. And so I said, no, we're going to go with them. And so I invited him. I said, well, you can join us at the other spot. He said, well, why don't you ride with me? And I remember the space had like not a balcony, but like a patio. And it was the summertime. So we were standing at the door to the patio. And he did everything he could, I felt, to try to persuade me to ride in the car with him, even though he agreed to go to the other place. But that agreement I had that was in the back of my mind is like it hooked me, and I couldn't let go of, you leave with who you came with, don't separate. And he, did everything from trying to charm me to, being persuasive. And when he finally realized that I wasn't giving in, it's like he became somebody else. And literally his countenance changed, and the anger in his face frightened me, and he just left out. And I knew in that moment, if I had gotten in the car with him, I would not have made it out probably. And so I was very thankful in that moment that agreement and discernment had hooked me and didn't allow me to just get into that space of danger.
That was God.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good. I'm so glad that you made it through that entire scenario, because it really could have gone like a whole different way. And so I'm really grateful for the discernment you had, and also like you had confidence in the thing too, and shout out to intuition, you know what I mean? Shout out to that voice that'll continue to tell us like, don't go there, don't do that, so on and so on. So yeah, I'm gonna pass it to Tracy. I'm so excited.
All right, thank you. And please forgive me not being able to be on video tonight. But when I hear the word discernment, it always takes me.
All right, I can do that, but not a problem.
It always takes me to a place of, I'll say, spirituality. First of all, I learned of the word and the initial meanings of it through church, and in experiencing various things that come to my mind in just regular day-to-day kinds of situations, your intuition, trusting your gut. There's also a huge piece for me that requires discernment. For me, requires quiet. It requires silence, and not a lot of talking, and certainly not a lot of sharing. And I have, I think, been given this, it's a misnomer to me, where people think that I am stuck up. And the reason I say that is because many times I am the quote unquote watchman on the wall. I'm kind of sitting back watching things because I see things in the spirit realm, and that is discernment to me, that don't need to be spoken about, but you need to be keenly aware, Tracy, of what's happening in your sphere, in your space. And you don't need to talk about it until it's maybe absolutely necessary to give a word or some words, some feedback, whatever, caution in terms of that. So unfortunately, I seem to get that kind of thing in a lot of negative kinds of situations, and it's almost like a protector. And I've noticed that people that I've been in covenant relationship with, and that's any type of covenant, not just like, going together with somebody, because I'm not married, never have been married, but people that I have really close relationship with, brothers, sisters, whatever, in Christ, and in spirit, whatever, that it becomes this protective kind of thing. And I wonder about that sometimes. If I'm an oldest child, is that something that automatically kicks in? You know, I was very protective of my younger brother, who I don't have to be so much now, you know, because he's a grown man. So that's what that means to me. And it's almost like a feeling within, a bubbling up kind of thing that causes me to just sit on back, and people wonder, oh, she's so quiet, when really that is not the case. You know, when I'm able to let loose and whatever, then yeah, that happens. But otherwise, I'm trying to watch and do what I feel like I've been part of what I've been sent here to do.
Word. I think I love that. I love what you said, like that bubbling up. I think that's a really, like, the image is really wonderful. And also, like, I completely relate to that, like, feeling.
Yeah. Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah. So I think I have a question for you. Like,
Hmm.
where, like, when you say like that bubbling up, if you could give that feeling a place in your body, where would that be?
It is in the pit of my stomach.
Mm,
It is definitely in my and you know what? It's more than one place, because let me hit the chakras, if you will, because I believe it is totally connected to the third eye. And there is that thing again in the belly. Um, and it requires some um an ability to get still and to stand. And that doesn't necessarily mean standing up, but it means to stand in principle, and to you know, I think be okay with the fact that you've been given this to do. Okay.
that was it. That was it right there. That was a word. That was a
Did
word.
Sandra say something about courage? Did I hear that? Or you? Did I hear that word earlier in terms?
I did use the word courage,
Okay.
I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Not be
Mhm.
afraid of it.
Mm. Which, okay, this goes so well with the thing. Don't be afraid of it. Now, shout out to the book pages. Um, I want everyone to go to page 14, or one
Before you
person
move,
find page 14. Oh
before you
yes.
move on, Sunday, I was trying to wait to see if someone in the live audience wanted to go. This is Vandally. Um,
Oh, hello. Yes, go ahead.
I wanted to piggyback on my Sister Booker there for a minute, Tracy.
Yes.
Good to hear your voice. Haven't seen you in a minute, but it was good to hear
Yes.
you share. Um, when I hear the word discernment, as I was pondering and thinking on it, I can't say what age. That doesn't come to recollection, but I knew I had something before I had the words to describe it. I knew something in every fiber of my being showed me, and I could just be aware. And that was before I kind of had an understanding where I could put words and even say a feeling to it. It was just a knowing that I had. But as I matured and grew, it took me a minute to learn to trust it. The truth is, I would trip over my own feet and realize I didn't listen. And that was one of the paths of me beginning to trust it. Still not really putting description, and I'm talking about in my teens and my 20s, to it. But as I became a parent, it became more, I became more willing to try and recognize it was just who I was. It's just who I am. I can't separate it. Um, and the word discernment, more and more through my 20s and 30s, and the spiritual connection, and then being connected to the Holy Spirit just became to grow more in awareness with me. But it was not just a protection from me. It also was a tool I was able to use to teach and demonstrate life beyond what I would say was my emotions or was my intellect or my school learning to my kids. One situation was just so clear to me as we were talking about this. We were living in Ohio and I had 3 kids. They were around 8, 7, and 6 at the time. And I'm driving down the road. We were coming from the store, heading to the store. And I always taught my kids, you don't pick up strangers in the car, you don't talk to strangers. That was the platform of my parenting. But as I passed a car broken down on the side of the road, I pulled over. And it was a man and a woman. And the man walked to my car and I said, is there any way I could help you? And my son is like, I mean, he's 7, but he's learned that I got to protect my mom and my sisters here at 7. He kind of knew that. And he's like, Mom, what you doing? He's questioning me from the back seat. And I'm like, it's okay. And so they said they believe they ran out of gas, but they're not really sure. And I said, well, if you want me to, I can give you a lift. There's a gas station not that far. And I allowed them into my car and I dropped them off at the gas station and make sure the gas attendant would go back and take care of them. And then I left. And so my son had all these questions for me. And what I explained to him in that moment was, as I passed, everything within me said, help them. And I said, that's an inner voice that you, as my children, could not hear. It wasn't spoken out loud, but I heard it. And I am on this journey was learning to discern that I'm supposed to act. And I was willing to be obedient. And over the years, my mom used to know an organization called Helping Hands. And it was then over the years, I realized that when you connect to the Holy Spirit and you allow God to use you as a vessel, that discernment is a way of you connecting and reaching out and helping other people. And so that's when it really unraveled for me. Thank you.
That was really good. I just want you to know I've taken notes on what you said. Good stuff. It's funny because when you talk about like that inner knowing or that inner listening, and even like the discernment around like how like allowing God to use you, which I thought was really, really good. Also dope to hear, discernment as protection and also tool to teach and demonstrate life beyond that little voice, right? I think that one, true, and thank you for sharing. And I think the two of you talked about something very similar where to understand that inner voice or to get that space, there has to be this silence or this not sharing or this silence sometimes is the voice itself, which I think is an interesting concept to kind of play around with. It might be a little meta, but if you want, please go ahead. But let's get to page 14. And this very much so goes hand in hand with what was said previously by Tracy and also connects to what we just heard. I'm in the first half, I guess first quarter, and I have a question and I'm just gonna read like two of the sentences. So we are at fire is generated by. So it's towards the top of that page, but a little lower. And this says fire is generated by emotions that come from fear. I found that to be really interesting because it really connects to that bubbling up that you were talking about, Tracy, in feeling and where you feel that in your body, feeling that like in your gut. And I think about like the third chakra and how it is ruled by fire and how it is represented by that thing. So when I read fire is generated by emotions that come from fear, I definitely connect with what you said earlier.
Mhm.
And it says, whenever we feel the emotions of anger, jealousy, envy, or hate, we experience a fire burning within us. Does anybody relate to that? Anybody understand that feeling? Y'all had that feeling? Like, just
Mhm.
me too, me too, me too.
Yes.
Uh, then this goes into the question that I have for y'all, right? And once we go through this, we will run through one more thing in this last half of this chapter, and we're gonna go into the first agreement. And shout out, we have 5 weeks. This is our second week. Yes, there is heat. So you know what I'm talking about. You know the heat, okay? You listen. But after we do that, we'll go into the first agreement and we'll have some time. I'm excited because we'll probably in our next session get to finish up that first agreement and then go into our next one. And that'll be like the goal. Again, we'll write all this stuff down, gonna have it to you. And I appreciate y'all patience and y'all prayers as I travel safely in the world. So this on the same page, in the same area, leaving or picking back up from where I just left off, where it's we experience a fire burning within us. We are living in a dream of hell. You ever heard someone say like hell is on earth? Like, like actually, like we're here, like it's happening right now. So my question is like, how would you define hell? Give it 3 words. You can feel free to like type it in the chat. You can feel free to keep it to yourself. You can feel free to write it down. You don't even have to share it. It's just something I want you to consider as we move through the text. And if you do want to share, like by all means. And and you don't have to read along with this, or you can continue to think and just listen to this passage. But towards the end of page 14, it says, every human has their own personal dream. And just like the society dream, it is often ruled by fear. Trapped or stuck energy. I agree with that. I totally feel that. Right? And so we're talking about the feelings of fear, right? Jealousy, envy, hate. We're talking about that fire being lit within us. Again, calling back to that bubbling up, calling back to that knowing, calling back to that space within us, right? And this ends saying, we learn to dream hell in our own life. We learn to dream hell in our own life, in our personal dream. The same fears manifest in different ways for each person, but we experience anger, jealousy, hate, envy, and other negative emotions. So, whatever those 3 words are, hold on to them, right? And also think about the things that you may have some fear around, things that may cause fear for you. Also, I want you to know fear is, there's a completely rational emotion. It happens. And I think that the awareness of what that is in the body or where you feel that, or how that even impacts your discernment, right? Your ability to make agreements or to know what kinds of agreements you're making. Because in each example that you all provided, you talked about a decision that you made, or just like something that you were like, oh, I need to help them, right? Or I need to make sure I stay away from this person. Like, this is not for me. This is unsafe, so on and so forth. So definitely want to keep that in mind too. What I also found really interesting, which is on page 15, is when they say all of humanity is searching for truth, justice, and beauty. I think that's really interesting because we were just talking about anger, jealousy, envy, and hate. And we can see a lot of these emotions on like the spectrum, right? So we can categorize like the truth, justice, and beauty as like really good. And then we can talk about the anger, jealousy, envy, or hate being really bad, right? If we're moving it on a scale. And this kind of calls back to something that Brene Brown, who's a shame and vulnerability researcher, talks about a lot. It's like one of the things that really got me into her in the first place was that we're able to feel to the extent of like our joy and our pain. So like if we numb our pain, we will also numb our joy, and vice versa. But if we are able to experience both in its fullness, then we can live. And I think that goes hand in hand with this last point about living that I thought was really, really interesting. And this is page 16. And first, we're going to talk about the mitote and then go into the fear. And then we're going into our first agreement. And we'll wrap up there. We have about 15, 16 or so more minutes left. So we are on page 16, starting at the top. We say, we trust what we believe, and our beliefs set us up for suffering. It is as if we live in the middle of a fog. We were talking about that, right? We were talking about that last week. The dream, not being able to see the mirror, right? Like, oh my gosh, I don't know. I see God in these people, but they don't see God in me, right? It is as if we live in the middle of a fog that doesn't let us see any further than our own nose. We live in a fog that is not even real. And it's funny because someone, I feel like in the chat, had said something about trapped or stuck energy, and I could even connect that to, that feeling of fog, or feeling foggy, or just not being able to make the best decisions or agreements, right? And this is the passage that I underlined. And like, if y'all underlined any passages, like, and y'all want to talk about them, like, please, like, let me know, send them to me. I will, make sure I point them out and pay close attention to them. But this sentence says, the fog is a dream, your personal dream of life, what you believe, all the concepts you have about what you are, all the agreements you have made with others, with yourself, and even with God. Your whole mind is a fog, which the Toltecs call a mitote. Mitote. There we go, mitote. So think about that fog, or the times where you felt foggy, right? Or it also reminds me of like the death card or the hangman in the tarot, feeling that feeling of like self-imprisonment. And there's also talk about self-abuse, and what that looks like, which is our last point before we get into this first agreement. If you turn to page 20 and we hit the middle of the page, it says, if you abuse yourself very badly, you can even tolerate someone who beats you up, humiliates you, and treats you like dirt, right? So the ability for us to either forgive or accept or discern, right? Whatever decisions we want to make or what we want to do, that goes hand in hand with our ability to give ourselves grace. You ever like be really hard on yourself? And this is the last point, where they talk about sin in this chapter as we end it out and go into our first agreement. They talk about sin, and they talk about sin being betrayal against yourself, which connects to the card that we pulled earlier, and how maybe we don't believe ourselves, or we believe things that are not true, or we hold ourselves. You ever made a mistake and then like held yourself to the cross about it? He was like, oh, that's terrible. How dare you do that? You're terrible. Like you just really like go crazy. You say all kinds of wild things to yourself that you would not tell your friend to say to themselves. Or if you was your own friend at that time, maybe you wouldn't have said it that way. You would have been a little nicer. But sometimes we get into a space where we will beat ourselves up. But that comes from some kind of belief, something that's a part of the fog, right? Whatever agreement it is that we might have about that thing or with that thing. And of course, feel free to, mark those pages for yourself. And, again, share any of your thoughts if you have. And I want to title the first agreement, which is be impeccable with your word, and kind of round out our conversation with what anyone thinks about what this means, to be impeccable with your word, or what comes to mind, or even what kinds of things in this chapter for the agreement have come up for you. So feel free to share, or flip through your book, or even just type out what it is that you feel be impeccable with your word means, or how you feel like you have been impeccable with your word, or what you want that to look like.
We're on page 25 now, the first agreement.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So let's see if someone here first, Brother Jones or Sister Jamie, wanted to share what do you think, what does that mean to you? Be impeccable with your word, page 25.
The word distributed very good was, right there,
Mhm.
disagreement.
No, I don't know what it means. Words. And is the idea of your word, or word being spirit, comes to mind. Word being energy, and again coming to mind scripture that says, "My word goeth forth; it shall not return unto me void, but it shall accomplish that wherewith I send it." The words are very powerful. And from the old school days, something like what my dad's generation would say, all I have is my word is out there. Now, my husband would even say that I gave my word. And so your word, there was a generation, I think Brother Jones and I was talking about this a little bit before we got started. Having a word, or giving your word, was like signing a note. It was signing an agreement. And just to be able to say, I gave my word, was very powerful. I think we've lost some of that in our current world and way of being, where we're not even clear on what the word means that we're saying.
I think is the trust we do have. That trust. Before it was trust. When you give your word, they will trust you because you mean what you said. But now we don't have that.
Can y'all hear us okay here?
Yes. That was, definitely with the trust. I agree with that. Recommended. Ooh, I'm about to write this down. Go ahead.
Because I like that too. When I was in some St. Martin, every year I go to, when I give you my word, I mean my word. When I say something, I stick to it. That's it. But now we don't have that. People will give you a word and like, it have no value. So you cannot trust when they tell you something. You don't believe it. You cannot believe it because there is no trust.
I think Elder Tracy was about to say something.
Well, I was just kind of thinking, listening to what the brother said there. I think by and large, we find a different set of values and ethics among people that are most likely younger than we are, and that's no slight, but they just do things on a different level. But I do know personally, um, in terms of this agreement, most definitely, if this is something that what it means to me is if you cannot keep your word, don't say it. And a lot of times one may have all of the intentions in the world to be able to do a thing or whatever, or keep that promise or that covenant or be ethical, and it does not pan out. But that does not mean that's not meaningful to them, to the person, is what I'm trying to say. I almost felt like it makes me think about the word prejudice. And sometimes with that, all prejudice is not the same, you know. Um, but in terms of this, it's the same thing. And for me, I'll be honest with you, this is an area, if I say something and I'm unable to do it, it's a thing for me. I mean, it is a real thing for me because it speaks to my character. It speaks to, just as the brother said, the trust. It speaks to ethics. It speaks to a number of things, and get it together or just don't say it, you know. Um, so it is a thing. And I think the book says that this is the hardest of the four agreements, or the most difficult of the four agreements to overcome or attain, let's say it that way, to attain, to always be a part of you. And I believe sometimes we may go along and everything's just fine. We always are. And then there may come that test, or what seems to be a test, and it just botches everything up, and then you got to work on that, work on your, back to that self-esteem that you were talking about in the previous um, chapter. You got to work on all of that again and get yourself together and keep moving with it and master that. That's all I have for right now.
Yeah, I feel that.
As a, and I'm, I have a conflict with a joining meeting that I'm supposed to be on, but I didn't want to leave because this is so interesting. So I'm going to have to speak and then jump off. But this chapter on words and the book I put in, and as a clinician, this was challenging for me in some degree. I'm going to have to turn this off because it's irritating two things. Hold on. Come back. It was challenging for me because there's some different perspectives here with words. And the first part that came to my mind is we don't really give the weight to how powerful it is as human beings just for us to speak. And sometimes as women, we've said, I don't have a voice at the job. I don't have a voice in my relationship. But not just having that voice where your say is heard. Do we ever think about what it takes for us to say a word? You ever seen someone who can't talk, who lost their voice box, or who had a stroke and the words can't formulate in their brain and then they can't come out of their mouth? The power and the energy it takes for us to bring a word up out of our system, we take for granted. Just the physical component of it, we take for granted. And that is something in our lifespan, nothing about us as a human being should be taken for granted, let alone our words. To the point where our words are just all over the place and they have no weight and no value or meaning. They've had different definition, the energy, the spirit, the emotions, the thought, all that it takes. We put more investment in if we were making a gumbo pot of food than what comes out of our mouths. We invest more there in mixing that meal together than what comes out of our mouths. But as a clinician, before I even get to that point, I want to know the words you're saying to yourself that comes out of your mouth. And that's what this chapter talked about, because those have more definitional impact because we have one mouth and two ears. And what comes out of our mouths, our ears hear twice. So it is going back into our operational system of thinking, being, processing. And we don't even think twice that we have impacted ourselves more than we said it to the other person. That old cliche, if I'm pointing my finger at you, I got three pointing back at me, but really I have my ears that are saying things back to me. So I hope we can dive and stay into this part of words, because it is such a power. If we could just change, and it is the hardest part, especially in relationships, to change how we speak, to speak with ourselves, with people, not at them, not to them.
That was very powerful. We're definitely going to talk more. We're definitely going to talk more about this next week. And I think we have a really great flow as far as I know our first week we had a lot of discussion, and then this week we went to some page numbers and some quotes and some passages. And so we're ending our time this week really ideating and thinking about what this means for us. And in our next meeting, we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of the book. So we'll have some page numbers and some discussion around the text, and then we'll move from there into a discussion about the next agreement. So I think that's a really cool flow to have. And again, I think the card that we pulled earlier about you're so welcome. Thank you for coming and being here. Thank you. And have a good, meeting. Appreciate your voice in the space. Hope to see you next week. Our card about betrayal and about really knowing the truth. And we've talked a lot about what does it feel like to know the truth? What does that look like for us? How do we feel it in our bodies? And we've moved into thinking about what does it mean to be impeccable with our word, or to be honest, or to be truthful, to be trustworthy, which we talked about as well. The idea of having trust in what that feels like, what that means in our relationships, and also what that feels like in our relationships with God, spirit, whatever that feels like and looks like to you. And so we are at 8:01. And what I'm going to do is invite you all again to take 3 deep breaths with me. And then we will say a quick, I want to send some protection your way. You know what I mean? For as you go out into the streets, make sure that, y'all travel here safe and get back safely to wherever you came, whether you are going to your car and going home, or whether you are hopping off of your Zoom and walking into the next room. Either way, I'm wishing you safety there. So you can close your eyes or not. Keep yourself to a soft gaze to your nose or to the floor. Sit back, relax, hands down. Inhale through the nose. I am willing to know the truth. Exhale through the nose. I am knowing the truth. One more time. Inhaling, I am willing to know the truth. And exhale, I am knowing of the truth. Last time. Inhaling, I am willing to know the truth. And exhaling, I am knowing of the truth. Again, the light in me sees the light in you. The darkness in me sees and honors the darkness in you. I know that we are much better people than when we left the world, because all of us collectively were in this space together and we're able to contribute to each other's growth and ideas. And therefore we are better going out. Namaste. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for practicing with me. Wishing y'all safety. Praying that everyone gets to their destinations safely. And I appreciate y'all's flexibility. And yeah, I'll see y'all next week.
Go, just a note, next week is our week off, everyone.
Oh, yeah. So the week after that.
Yeah, we're on 2 weeks.
The 15th?
Yes, the 15th, we're off, and we're coming back the 22nd. So we'll just note that now, post on our social media. If you're watching this via YouTube now at a later time, please hit the like and share button. Share it with your social network. We appreciate you being here. We're at Triumph Life, 950 Bergen Street, Newark, New Jersey. You can join us here live in person or via our social. You can find us on our website and on our social media page. Thank you, Sister Jessica. Safe travels for you, and we'll see everyone for this gathering in 2 weeks. Thank you, Brother Jones.
Okay.
All
Jamie.
right.
Welcome.
Thank you, Elder
All right.
Tracy.
Good
You're
night.
welcome. Good night, all.
Bye.